For those who might not know, there is a term that gets thrown around the lifting community a lot called the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Basically, what is the ratio of gains a certain exercise produces in relation to the fatigue that it generates? Because even though placing stress on your muscles causes it to grow, it also generates a lot of fatigue. And ideally, you want to pick an exercise that produces a lot of stimulus with a very low fatigue cost. Now, this concept is important to know because it should encourage a lifter to make smart choices about their programming and take into consideration the fatigue they are willing to accumulate by choosing to do a certain exercise and ask themselves if it's worth it. After hearing about this concept, it's always been in the back of my head, and honestly, it's helped me in all areas of my life. Everything in life comes at the expense of another thing. And there seems to be this illusion of sacrifice. For some reason, people act like sacrifice is this conscious thing that you do. You either sacrifice something or you don't. But I don't think it works that way, because whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, you are always sacrificing something. And sometimes choosing not to sacrifice something is a sacrifice in itself. For example, if you're in a relationship with someone and they don't like something that you're doing, you either get to choose to sacrifice that thing to make your partner happy. But if you say, I'm not going to do that, well, you're still sacrificing something, and that's perhaps the connection you have to your partner. And it seems that most people don't realize this. Even though this concept of stimulus to fatigue ratio exists, I feel like people's interpretation of it can be very flawed, because oftentimes we don't actually understand which choice gives us the best bang for our buck with the least amount of consequences. Take ego lifting as an example. Ego lifting is basically unnecessarily maximizing the fatigue of a lift and reducing the stimulus of it, because you incorporate more muscles into the exercise, which actually takes away from the target muscle that you're trying to grow. And it's like, why would people deliberately do that? Why would people decide they want to get the worst bang for their buck consciously? And the truth is, I think it's because people don't understand that they are actively hurting themselves. People's interpretation of what a good stimulus is and how much fatigue is generated from something is often very warped and distorted. Take alcohol as an example. Personally, I think alcohol's stimulus to fatigue ratio is really not worth it. There are honestly countless studies now basically saying that alcohol is essentially poison, and sure, if you do it more moderately, it's less bad for you, but the best would be not doing it at all. Yet many people believe that it's still beneficial. Why? Because they believe that it helps them have a good time with their friends, relax, take the ease off of things, and I don't doubt that it does those for people, but I still don't think it's worth the cost. Instead of that, you probably want to hang out with friends that you can have a good time with when you're sober, and perhaps work on your stress management in healthier ways. Another problem is, unfortunately, humans have encoded it in their brains that more is better. We're such maximalists, and I think what will actually help us progress as a society is finally realizing that it's a lot more nuanced than that. We approach things in such a monkey way. It's like, I have one banana, but 2 banana better than 1 banana. So 3 banana even better than 2 banana. And the thing is, a lot of decisions in life are a lot more complex than that. I think this is also another reason why people are workaholics. I gotta be honest, the way that 9-to-5 jobs are set up today, I would say has a terrible stimulus to fatigue ratio, because you cannot tell me that you are actually providing 8 hours worth of genuine stimulus. Ask anyone who's had an office job, they never tell you that they're working 8 hours. They're like, I did my work and then I just watched YouTube videos and then I pretended to do my work. This structure that we have with the 9 to 5, I would argue is actually terrible for society and probably really prevents us from developing, because every single day going for an 8-hour shift, the fatigue you're accumulating just keeps increasing. And the stimulus that you're providing is not outpacing the fatigue that's building up. And as a result of fatigue building up, you can't recover from it, just how in a training session, if you push yourself way too hard, you're gonna get to a point where you either injure yourself or you burn out, and now you're even regressing. And that happens, I would argue, a lot when it comes to people's relationship to work. I guess it's just not as obvious immediately, because I think when you push your body, it gives you a much more obvious reaction. And I guess this has become a major shift in the lifting community recently, which I think is a good thing, where people finally are realizing that just more isn't infinitely better. In fact, the diminishing returns hits quite quickly, and then after that it gets to a point where you're actually regressing. But I think people need to realize that this stimulus to fatigue ratio applies to everything in life. I hope for anyone who's watching this video, every time you make a choice, perhaps have it in the back of your mind. Is this giving me the most bang for my buck? And where are the diminishing returns? When does this start plateauing? And realize that everything does come at a cost of something else. There is no such thing as not sacrificing. You always will sacrifice. And it can either be a conscious choice or an unconscious one. But you always have to think about what you're doing and if it's actually giving you meaningful growth, or is it giving you the illusion of growth, but in that process generating all this fatigue and burnout that's essentially dragging you down. Once you realize this, there's something liberating about knowing that you don't have to be an extreme maximalist. And in fact, you can get the same amount of gains on something, or even better, with doing far less. And when you realize that, you can spend all that extra space that you just generated for yourself and focus on just being a happy, joyful person and living your life to the fullest.